It wouldn't be the first time a seemingly peaceful rising power broke bad. Prior to 1914, Germany hadn't fought a major war for more than 40 years. In the 1920s, Japan looked to many foreign observers like a responsible stakeholder as it signed treaties pledging to limit its navy, share power in Asia, and respect China's territorial integrity. In the early 2000s, Russian President Vladimir Putin mused about joining NATO and linking Russia closer to the West. That each of these nations nonetheless launched barbaric wars of conquest underscores a basic truth. Things change. The same country can behave differently, perhaps radically so, depending on the circumstances. After Imperial Japan started World War II in the Pacific by attacking the United States at Pearl Harbor, Admiral Isoroku Yamamoto reportedly wrote in his diary, "I fear all we have done is to awaken a sleeping giant." Less dramatically, but just as momentously, America's aggression containment policy against Chinese trade practices have awakened the long-slumbering giant. Under Chinese President Xi Jinping, Beijing is amassing ships, planes, and missiles as part of the largest military buildup by any country in decades. Notwithstanding some recent efforts to lure back skittish foreign investment, China is stockpiling fuel and food and trying to reduce the vulnerability of its economy to sanctions, steps one might take as conflict nears. Many U.S. officials believe the risk of war is rising. CIA Director William Burns has said, "Xi seeks the capability to take Taiwan by 2027. And as China's economy struggles, some observers, including reportedly U.S. intelligence analysts, are looking for signs that a peaking China might turn aggressive in order to distract attention from internal problems or to lock in gains while it still can. Although China is acting as a revisionist power, it does not intend to rely on military force to overturn the existing status quo. After all, classical Chinese strategic thinking praises the wisdom of winning without fighting. If you look at Russian and Chinese ideology today, you'd have to ask, what exactly is it? If there is a Russian ideology, it's ethnic nationalism. China's case is also largely nationalism. Rather than a national state, China can be more accurately regarded as a historical empire whose prosperity, civilizational achievements, innovations, and cultural prestige were renowned for many millennia. As such, it has influenced the Far East, Central Asia, and Indochina. However, in the 19th and 20th centuries, the Middle Kingdom underwent a series of humiliations as a result of internal trouble, stagnancy, and foreign aggression committed by Britain, Japan, and Russia. Moreover, the implementation of overzealous ideological policies after the Chinese Civil War, including the Great Leap Forward and the Cultural Revolution, generated counterproductive results for Chinese national interests. The enduring impacts of these setbacks would not be reversed until the implementation of the pragmatic reforms undertaken by Deng Xiaoping in the 80s. The Chinese Communist Party was facing a legitimacy deficit, and they were looking for things to fill it. So nationalism replaced communist revolution. The same thing happened with the Soviet Union falling apart. The Russian Federation had to reinvent itself on the basis of Russian nationalism. Nationalist ideology exists in many other places. Nationalism is not at all a new ideology, but it's not the same as during the Cold War. Beijing's promise that its rise will be peaceful does not mean that it will be frictionless or harmonious, only that it prefers a trajectory in which hard power is not required in its long march towards superpower status. All right, so the Middle Kingdom is using neo-mercantilist strategies of economic statecraft to place itself as the cornerstone of a vast network of overlapping economic exchanges which go from Iberia to the Korean Peninsula and beyond. With the promise of profitable business opportunities, development, investment, credit, and trade, China intends to absorb markets rather than to conquer colonies. Cash is king, not just as money, but also as political instrument that serves the national interest. This is the context in which the creation of multilateral projects headed by China, like the Belt and Road Initiative, the Asian Infrastructure Investment Bank, and the Regional Comprehensive Economic Partnerships, must be understood. Beijing is laying the groundwork for the development of a parallel system of international economic governance beyond the control of Western powers. What the Middle Kingdom envisages for the consolidation of a regional order is a greater Eurasia co-prosperity sphere with itself as the first amongst equals. All right, guys, that was interesting part of the history, but are we really in the new Cold War? And if we are, what are the lessons that we can draw from this lingering situation? Let's talk about the 5 quick lessons and events of this new brimming power rivalry. The first is that allies matter. China has clients that are beholden to it in one way or another. Russia, the most important, has become a liability because of Vladimir Putin's war on Ukraine. America, meanwhile, is blessed with a European alliance revitalized by its firm response to Russia's aggression, a stronger NATO, and close allies in Asia. Second, deterrence requires military capability to match rhetoric. China has been improving every aspect of its military capability, just as the war in Ukraine and wargaming about Taiwan have revealed weaknesses in the West's. The West must respond by procuring more advanced weaponry, developing secure supply chains for critical materials and components, and rebuilding the defense industrial base. Peace through strength really works. Third, we need to engage in efforts to avoid accidental war. To this day, we benefit from contacts between the American and Russian armed forces, established during the Cold War, to prevent an accident between them. Fourth, remember George Kennan, the American diplomat based in Moscow, who wrote the Long Telegram in 1946, predicting that the Soviet Union's own internal contradictions would eventually weaken it. China is economically stronger than the Soviet Union, but has many of its own contradictions: a deflating property sector, high youth unemployment, and disastrous demography. The final lesson of the First Cold War is that nothing is inevitable. Success today will require democracies to come to terms with their own flaws and contradictions, not least the fractures in society amplified in online echo chambers. Failure to safeguard the legitimacy of institutions that protect freedom has led to plummeting confidence in democracy itself. In a zero-sum international system, the rise of China motivates strategic anxieties in both Washington and several regional capitals. Unsurprisingly, existing coalitions, like the Five Eyes, are being repurposed, and new ones are being built, AUKUS, the Quad, in order to contain China's conventional and unconventional quest for Lebensraum in Asia. So far, conflict has not surfaced in Asia because no red line has been crossed yet. Nevertheless, tensions remain high, and the coexistence of many players with incompatible interests is problematic for regional stability. Barely a few years ago, Indian and Chinese soldiers killed each other with sticks and stones in a border skirmish. Together, trends like North Korean military muscle flexing, the remilitarization of Japan, a simmering trade war between the US and China, changing regional geopolitical alignments, the threat of militant Islamism in Central Asia, the contentious status of Taiwan, and Beijing's maritime disputes with Manila and Tokyo over the control of insular positions point in a troublesome direction. Under these conditions, the prospective clash between China as a rising challenger and the US as a declining and belligerent hegemon is exceedingly dangerous. At this point, it is unknown if Beijing and Washington can avert the proverbial Thucydides trap. The absence of war has hardly meant the absence of aggression. Beijing has used military and paramilitary capabilities to enlarge its writ in the South and East China Seas. In recent years, China has also engaged in bloody scraps with India. Nonetheless, the fact that Beijing has abstained from major wars while the United States has fought several of them, and it has allowed Chinese officials to claim that their country is following a uniquely peaceful path to global power. And it compels those who worry about war to explain why China, which has experienced record-breaking growth enabled by 2 generations of peace, would change course so dramatically. This new Cold War has many dimensions that, if not addressed effectively and comprehensively by clear-eyed Western governments, could metastasize the early stages of World War III into a more kinetic phase. The West will then have tragically blundered into another conflict through misguided accommodationist policies.